Hello, I'm Mario Giarda. I'm a senior economist at the Central Bank of Chile. And today I'm going to present you the role of progressivity on the economic impact of fiscal transfers in a hang for Chile. This is joint work with Benjamín García and Carlos Lizama, also from the bank. And we are very happy to have this paper in this program conference, so I kindly thank the organizers for putting this paper in the program. And also thanks to the bank for organizing this really great conference that is interest to me especially. Okay? The usual disclaimer applies, and let's go. Again, this is a paper that in some sense summarizes all the things we saw today. Okay? But it's an application for Chile. And the question is pretty straightforward, and this is about the effects of fiscal stimulus. We know this is a very old question that mainly, and there are many papers analyzing the impact of government spending on the economy, but by the perspective of government purchases of goods and services. Okay? There are some papers that studies the role of fiscal transfers direct to households, the thing that we call T. And these are in the US, and now we are seeing more papers being published, but they are mainly to study the MPCs. That is kind of a more micro question because you want to see whether individual households respond more or less to this fiscal stimulus. And there are even fewer on the differences between alternative policy schemes. What I mean by this? These programs have very different features, like sizes, progressivity, and stuff. And there are not many papers that study the differential impact at the macro level of alternative fiscal schemes. And this is what we do in this paper. We study the effects of fiscal stimuli with different progressivities. We're going to go and we're going to take several fiscal programs from 2019 to 2022, and we're going to study whether they have differences in their design and ask whether these different programs had different macro effects. Let me be clear about something. We're gonna refer to progressivity. We're gonna define progressivity as how the government distributes resources among households with different incomes. Okay? And we're gonna refer just to direct stimulus checks to households, and we're not gonna refer anything about the taxes side of fiscal policy. Okay? So we're gonna leave the progressivity of taxes fixed. Let me motivate this question with these two figures. In the left-hand side, I have total household support to individuals. Okay? And you can see that from 2020 to late 2021, this household support increased by a lot. Here you have $1 billion, and we had like some of the household support measures were like 3 or 4% of GDP in total, or yearly GDP in total in a month. Okay, as Marcus has clearly shown. Why we think this is a nice question at the macro level? Because if you look at data on consumption measured as transactions of credit and debit card, you can observe that in the times of these policies, highlighted by the vertical lines, consumption rose by a lot. Okay? And then industrial production, in black, followed. Okay? So it seems that these policies helped recover the aggregate demand that was falling like crazy there. Okay? In 2020, in March 2020. But let me say something else about this household support. Here, we have, since 2019 to 2022, lots of different types of policy. Okay, I will say lots, but there are 12, okay? That for us is a lot. And you have very different here that were like one order of magnitude lower, and here you had like very strong policies. And they are all, some of them are put together at the same time. And this is what we're gonna take advantage of. We're gonna build a hang model for Chile, taking advantage of the heterogeneity of these fiscal programs, okay? I'm going to start by showing you some empirical evidence. First, a plain vanilla structural VAR, where we're going to show that the aggregate account of fiscal transfers, when you go to the fiscal accounts, stimulate output. Okay, this is just to motivate that this question might be relevant for the business cycle. Then I'm going to show you with microdata that more progressive policies have a stronger effect on consumption than non-progressive ones. And this is what we try to go a little bit deeper, and we're going to show you with data on transactions with credit and debit card. So the research question is pretty straightforward, as you may imagine. Is how does progressivity affect consumption? Okay? And to rationalize all these facts and try to analyze how progressivity affects consumption, we're going to build a Hank model calibrated for Chile. Okay? We're going to build on the nice work by Adrien and Ludwig. And this model replicates the key moments of the economy well, namely the distribution of assets, the distribution of income, and income risk in the economy. And I'm going to show you something that we call the policy slack, that is not in this slide, but you can decompose consumption into an average and a distributional channel of the policy. Okay, which means that the policy is going to have both a cross-sectional effect on aggregates and an average or general equilibrium effect as well. And finally, I will show you that something that some of you have referred to as well, that the effects depend on progressivity, on the monetary policy stance, and also on how this transfer is financed. Okay? This paper is related to three strands of the literature. First, on fiscal policy in heterogeneous agents new Keynesian model. We follow very closely the paper by Adrien, Ludwig, and Matthew. But we include search and matching frictions. Because it seems that search and matching frictions, as Giarda, Salas, and co-authors show, explain well fluctuations in unemployment and hence in income risk in an economy like Chile. Okay? And then I'm going to build on Patterson. How this works? No, this doesn't work. Okay, then we're going to build on Patterson, who shows that you can decompose in this kind of models fluctuations in income into these average and distributional channels. Okay, finally, this paper is kind of related to the effects of fiscal stimulus checks, and I'm going to show you why this is. So the agenda for this presentation is the following. I will show you first the empirical evidence to discuss a little bit why we are motivated to build this model. Then I will briefly describe the model and the calibration. And then I will present to you a variable that we call the policy slack, which is like summarizes all the effects of these policies in the aggregates. Finally, the dynamics in the full model, if I have some time, and then I will conclude. Okay? Good. Let's start with the empirical evidence. First, let me start by saying that fiscal transfers, now and before, have aggregate effects. Okay? If you go to the accounts of the government and run a fiscal Bayesian structural VAR with this data, and you take monthly data from January 2005 to June 2022, run the simplest Blanchard and Perotti identification with Koleski identification, and you put transfers as a share of GDP, fiscal income, industrial production, and the CPI in this VAR, you're going to find that fiscal policy, fiscal transfers, something I didn't say is that we follow Céspedes, Galí, and Fornero 2013, okay? So we update these estimates, okay? So you can find that the effect of fiscal transfers is positive over industrial production, and then the CPI follows, okay? Then let me go to kind of the core of the empirical part. So let me convince you that there were simultaneously progressive and non-progressive policies. Why is this important? Because we want to run a regression there then, okay? So to do so, first let me again define what we mean by progressivity. Progressivity for us is how the government distributes household support among households with different incomes, okay? We're gonna refer to progressivity as an absolute measure of progressivity, okay? If the lowest quintile received more than the fifth quintile, that policy is gonna be progressive. And we're gonna do the following. We're gonna take 12 different measures from since 2018, and we're gonna take these measures at a municipal level, okay? A municipality here in Chile is also called a comuna, which is the lowest administrative division in Chile, okay? We're gonna do this because we have the data on consumption at a municipal level as well, okay? So to be consistent with that, we have to do what I'm gonna do at the municipal level. And what we're gonna do here, we're gonna take the ratio of the transfers. Well, we're gonna classify each municipality into a quintile of the distribution, okay? And we're gonna calculate how much of each policy was delivered to a given quintile in time t, okay? So this is gonna be a measure, and then we're gonna divide the first quintile transfers to the transfer of the fifth quintile. This is gonna be done for every program and at every point of time. So we're gonna have like a time varying progressivity of each of the policies, okay? Then we're gonna, no, this is, again, sorry. Then we're gonna define or label as progressive the policy, the overall policy as progressive if this ratio is larger than 1, and as non-progressive if this ratio is lower than 1, okay? We're gonna classify the programs and not the programs at different periods, okay? So the program is overall progressive or the program is overall non-progressive, okay? This is what we obtain. We obtain by definition, of course, two different types of programs, one group that is progressive, another group that is non-progressive, okay? Good. This is just to classify the programs into the progressive and the non-progressive group. And we're gonna go back to the municipality level and do the following exercise. We're gonna study the dynamic effects of progressivity, and we're gonna take microdata for Chile. We're going to take microdata on monthly credit and debit card transactions, income, and fiscal support. We're going to have observations at time t, at every month, monthly observations at a municipal level, and for these two different programs, okay? We're going to denote, that was a spoiler. So we're gonna denote the municipality with I, okay? And we're gonna take consumption, the total amount of consumption of the municipality, we're gonna call it C. So CIT is consumption or credit and debit card transactions. And we're gonna take the total amount of these purchases and denote it by CIT, municipality I in month T, okay? And then we will take all of the progressive measures given to a municipality I in type T. We're gonna add up all of that. And we're gonna take the non-progressive measures given to a municipality I in time T, okay? So these are all amounts of money. Pesos, okay? So we're gonna take the sample that is monthly again from January 2018 to June 2022, and we estimate a dynamic version of MISRA and Zurico, which is just trying to estimate a local projection like, okay, I will be very clear with that, like equation, that we're going to follow the effect of a transfer, or both transfers, on consumption in period t plus k. Okay, so this is beta k, is just how consumption responds in t plus k to an increase of 1 peso in the progressive policy in t. Okay, so we follow how consumption responds over time. Okay, we do so for both policies. And then we control for income at the municipality level, changes in income, for lags of the policies as well, and time and municipality fixed effects. Okay? The results look like follow. The first to note here is that both of these policies seem to raise consumption significantly. Okay? But the more progressive policy seems to be to raise consumption by more than the non-progressive. In other words, it seems that the non-progressive policy, if you look, looks kind of a permanent income response. Okay, so this goes, and this is a result. Let me tell you something, some of the drawbacks of this exercise. First, that we cannot interpret this result as MPCs of the households. Why? Well, because we don't have cash purchases. Second, because we don't have all consumption of households. And second, for that reason, we cannot say much about the total effect of this policy as well. Okay. So, but what we think we can say is the differential effect of these two different policies. We are very confident we can say that, okay?
Just one clarifying question. In the case of Chile, what you call non-progressive, you are referring to the withdrawal from pension funds, and the other one are the transfer from the government, no? Those are the two main differences, because the other things are very small.
Okay,
no?
There's a, yes. We have 12 policies that include pension fund withdrawals. We can discuss later if these are good, if taking those as transfers is a good assumption or not. We can discuss that. And also we have all of the other transfers like universal fiscal health and yes. So, yes, if I answered your question correctly? Or
but most of the action of those two are those two.
I would say so, and actually the pension fund withdrawals are in the red line.
Okay.
And the other ones follows more the fiscal transfers, okay? So, having said, let me summarize a little bit the two empirical facts. First, fiscal transfers have a macro effect. And second, we find that non-progressive policies have lower effect than progressive policies in stimulating consumption. Okay, and that motivates us to start thinking about how are the mechanisms, and also when more progressivity has a stronger effect on the economy. So this is why we built a model which follows very closely Auclair, Rognlai, and Straub. This is a general equilibrium model where time is discrete. There's no aggregate risk. Households are in measure 1 subject to idiosyncratic income risk. There are 2 assets, but we take the hunk illiquid by Auclair and Rognlai and Straub, and there's a borrowing constraint that is we don't let households borrow. Then we add on top of that unemployment risk because we think it's an important feature of the Chilean economy. So there's an unemployment risk that represents the extensive margin, and we also have an intensive margin here, okay? These households, as the other papers show, are subject to a friction that is the take as given the hours, wages, and employment set by intermediaries or a union that sets those hours, okay? And then after tax income is something related to wages times hours times the productivity if employed, and after taxes, labor income taxes, that are going to be proportional, okay? We're not making these progressive or anything. And there's if unemployed, there's an employment benefit omega, which is proportional to the productivity times wages. We assume dividends, households receive dividends, and they are distributed with an ad hoc rule, okay? And finally, these households receive a government transfer that we denote by FZ that crucially depends on the productivity and the type of the household, okay? Then there's a government, which is one of the important parts of our model, is pretty standard, but important for us, that raise labor income taxes, accumulates debt, and pays the unemployment insurance to unemployed households. We assume there's a transfer function, okay? So the government not only sets the total transfer, T, but the shape of this function among the different productivity levels. And this function depends on this parameter, Aleph, which affects negatively the shape of this function, okay? So if Aleph is positive, we define the policy as progressive. If Aleph is negative, we define this as non-progressive, or regressive, as you would like to call it. So the fiscal balance follows the following rule, because we want this transfer to be paid partially with debt as well, or with taxes. And we're going to try different parameterization for that row, where that row, if that row is 0, transfers are completely tax financed, okay? And finally, there's a Taylor rule that responds to inflation and the unemployment rate, okay? Let me go faster with this. Firms are the usual ones in new Keynesian models, but we have capital, and we have, of course, the intensive and the extensive margin in the production function. They are in monopolistic competition, and there's a markup mu in steady state. There are Rothenberg price frictions, so we deliver there a new Keynesian Phillips curve, and we assume there are capital adjustment costs and investment in the model. We assume labor markets, again, are pretty standard for the macro literature. We want to go as close as possible to the model we use for forecasting later, so we want to add this kind of frictions as well to compare that with maybe make the exercises that Marco showed in some years, I think. So we have certain matching frictions. We follow DMP very closely, and individual households are subject to unemployment risk, as you can see also, on top of idiosyncratic income risk as well, okay? And there's a job market intermediary that sets unemployment and wages, where the bargain wage is the conventional one. That is a weighted average between the unemployment insurance and the marginal product of labor. Okay? Good. So let me go to some of the new things. I already boring you, but the calibration. Okay? We calibrate this model for Chile following Kaplan model and Violante. We separate first illiquid from liquid assets. And we find something very similar to Kaplan model and Violante. Liquid assets are about twice the GDP, while illiquid assets are about twice GDP, and liquid assets are about 20% of GDP. We're going to use these two numbers in different ways, as we have a hanky liquid structure. That is, that households own capital, but they cannot switch it in response to a shock, the portfolio. We're going to set the capital stock equal to the liquid assets in this economy. And we're going to leave the total assets in the model free, okay? That is going to be an untargeted moment. Then we have the share of hand to mouth. That is going to be the part of the distribution that we're going to match in the model, okay? So we're going to run the model, we're going to solve it, and we're going to try to match the share of hand to mouth of households. Okay, that is about 42% of households in Chile. This is a very large number that delivers very high MPCs. Okay, and we can discuss that later if you have doubts about it. But we follow Kaplan-Meier very closely with the data for Chile. Then we go to the data on idiosyncratic, on administrative monthly data of workers' income, and we want to calibrate the other part of the distributions here, the labor income inequality and labor income risk. Okay? To do so, we have monthly data of workers' income. We take 2005 to 2019. There are 5 million observations each month. Then this data is great because you can estimate these moments at a monthly frequency. Okay? We're going to do it just at a quarterly frequency because it's the frequency we use in the model. Okay? So the moments we're going to target are those of Guvenen and close to Kaplan-Meier as well. We're going to consider the variance of log of income. We're going to take the variance of the log growth of quarter-to-quarter income and the log growth to 20 quarters income, okay? This is kind of different to what the literature shows, but we're trying with this, we want to capture the fact that households are also subject to long-run shocks as well as subject to short-run shocks. So 20 quarters are what Guvenen has in all of his papers. That is 5 years, okay? You know that we fit a model with a transitory and a permanent component, and we think the model matches the data well, okay? And we follow closely Kaplan-Meier with this, and what we find is that we have a combination of two different shocks that follow an AR1 that is non-Gaussian to capture the high kurtosis of these distributions, and we find also a permanent component that has low probability and a transitory component that has a high probability. So the households in Chile are subject to like lifetime shocks, something like that are very low likely, and are subject to short-run shocks that happen about all periods, okay? The remainder of parameters we set are pretty standard. We follow both the main literature here and the model of projections in the bank. But let me discuss some of them. We want to target a share of hand-to-mouth that is 42%, and an interest rate that is pretty low for Chile, at least. After the pandemics, we had pretty low interest rates. And to match those, we find a discount factor of 0.95 quarterly. Then we want to match an unemployment rate of 8%, given a separation rate of 4%, and we calibrate the vacancy cost, the matching efficiency, and all of the parameters of the labor markets according to that. Okay? Good. Let me talk a bit about the microfit of this model. This model is very stylized, and we have, in the end, kind of a one asset, but we think we do it reasonably well in terms of matching the liquid assets as a share of GDP in the data. Okay, our model finds 18% with all of those parameters, and the data is about 19%. Okay, this is an untargeted moment, of course. We think we do it great there, but then we have the consumption profile that is very important for us because we want to give them transfers to households with different MPCs that are weighted in consumption differently, okay? So we wanted to match the distribution of consumption of the data better, but we have, I think we do a reasonable work, and we can discuss this later, okay? So having said that about the model, describing the calibration for Chile, let me introduce to you a variable that we call the policy slack that we think help us in evaluating this kind of policies, okay? The policy slack is going to be a variable that we define as the support given in excess of the fall in income. Imagine you are in a recession and you received, and your income fell by 10, and the government gave you 13. Your policy slack is going to be 3, okay? So the government gave you more than you needed. And we think this looks very like income, but here what we want to emphasize is that this policy slack appears when policies are pretty active, okay, and in giving money to households. And to motivate this variable, let me take just 2 examples of household support, those that were given in 2020, okay? We have in 2020 a policy that was progressive. Here we have the quintile in income. We have a transfer that we call progressive and a transfer that we call non-progressive. And you can see that these 2 policies were distributed very, very differently among the different households, okay? You can see that progressive policies, the share, how much they receive falls with respect to income, whereas the non-progressive one was kind of flat, okay? In addition to this, we observed an important fall in incomes of the different quintiles, except for the 5th quintile. This is interesting. And you can see that in the data in Chile in 2020, most of the quintiles saw their income fall, and the effect of the policies on total income were pretty different, as you may imagine, of course. You can build the variable I just described before as the sum of the 2nd, 3rd, with the 4th column, and you can see that the policy slacks of these 2 policies are pretty different, okay? One was super generous, the non-progressive, and super non-progressive as well, okay? And then you had this one that was non-generous and was like non-targeted and couldn't, no, it was targeted but couldn't compensate the falling incomes of all households, okay? So this is just to motivate that this exists in the data, and we can take the model and evaluate these policies by using just this variable, okay? So we do this. Now I haven't explained how we calibrate the different policies here, and we're going to take the following stance. We're going to pick some of the policies, in particular the ones I'm showing you here, and we're going to calculate the parameter implied from the function of fiscal transfers, okay? This aleph that represents the progressivity of the policy. And for one of the policy, the progressive, we find a parameter that is positive, so this function is downward sloping, and the non-progressive is negative, so this function is upward sloping, okay? We're going to calibrate the model with these two parameters, and I'm going to show you some exercises now of how you can think about how are the effects of these different types of fiscal policies. Okay, why the policy slack is important for consumption? Let's take the interest rate constant, okay, for now, and we can show that consumption can be written as follows. Not consumption, fluctuations in consumption. Can be written as the integral of a matrix of MPCs times how the policy slack fluctuates. Okay? These MPCs are going to be individually dependent, and there's going to be a relationship between the MPCs and the policy slack, as you're going to see in this equation. And then you can, by using the definition of a covariance, you can show that fluctuations in consumption depends on an average effect, that is the average marginal propensity to consume times the average fluctuations in this policy slack, and a distributional channel that is the covariance between the MPCs and the policy slack. And, okay? This is very close to Patterson, extended a little bit to account for different types of policies. Okay? This is nothing new. Okay? So you can decompose this further into a direct effect between average and distributional that depends only on the policy, and an indirect effect that depends on all of the other variables we have in the model, namely labor income, fluctuations in profits, and other variables. Okay? Good. How does the first decomposition look? Well, we observe, okay, and how consumption responses, how consumption reacts to the different policies. Okay, you have in the left-hand panel the response of consumption and the decomposition in response to the progressive policy. In the medium panel, you have the response to the non-progressive policy, and in the right-hand panel, you have the differences between these two panels. Okay, and what we observe first is that progressive policies have a stronger effect on consumption than non-progressive ones. And also, most importantly, in both of the cases, this term covariance seems to be important. Okay? What explains the difference between the non-progressive and progressive, the effect of the progressive and non-progressive policies? Well, it is the covariance between, on impact at least, is the covariance between these two, is the distributional effect, that is represented by the covariance between the MPCs and the policy slack. But also, and most importantly, this higher amplification effect comes from effects that we call, that are the average effects, or those that are not related to the distribution of these policies. Okay, so you see further amplification, not because you are giving money to households with high MPCs, but because this fact has a stronger effect on the other variables, okay? And that stimulates consumption further. Let me give you the last decomposition here, is that you can decompose these two direct, the average and the distributional channels into the direct and indirect effect. This following Kaplan, Molen-Belante, or the job market paper by Adren. And what you can observe in the differences between progressive and non-progressive is that the term that is related to the covariance between the MPCs and the policy, this is just how differentially the progressive policy is targeted among households with high MPCs with respect to the non-progressive one. Okay, this is the green one, explains all of the distributional channel first, and explain most of the effect, the differential effect between a progressive and a non-progressive policy. And finally, we find that the indirect channel, but average, is a large proportion of the effect, okay, of progressivity. What we can conclude about this, first, is that in general, we have that there's a distributional channel that comes from these covariances, that you have to evaluate these policies not only by the aggregate effects, but how they distribute among the different households. Okay? Good. And the final exercises, and I'm going to go quick now because we are all tired, I think. And is that what are the dynamics in the full model? Because we said before the interest rate constant, we're gonna leave that, we're gonna take out that assumption, and I'm gonna measure that first, the effects of progressivity remain, but the overall effect of the transfer depends a lot on the monetary policy stance, but also how this transfer is financed, with debt or taxes. First, what I'm gonna show you just some plots about the effects of these policies on consumption, and how maybe you can pick another decomposition, but we just show the direct and indirect effects, okay? And you can see that, for example, if you had an active monetary policy where the response with the Taylor principle holds, and monetary policy also reacts to unemployment, you can see that the effect of all of these policies are not so long-lasting, okay? You start entering in a falling consumption very quickly, but we also observe that the progressive policy, at least on impact, has a strong effect, okay? Second, if you had like a very extreme monetary policy stance, something that we could call super relaxed monetary policy that doesn't react, and actually when the inflation rate goes up, the real rate actually goes down, you would see that progressive policies stimulate consumption very, very strongly. And more importantly, the indirect effects, those effects that are from the side of labor income and profits and so on, are super strong, okay? And the effect of progressive remains much larger than the non-progressive. And finally, if you just have an active monetary policy again, and the policy is just tax financed, of course, because we have distortionary taxation, you can end up in a recession, actually, in response to these policies, okay? Which one of these cases is more relevant for the case that I show you in the empirical evidence? Remains to be explored. I think, and maybe Luis Felipe can, or the central bank can talk about a little bit more. And let me conclude. Empirically, in Chile, progressivity in transfers helps stimulate consumption. We build a model for Chile, a hang model for Chile, to study the effects of progressivity. We show that we can decompose the effects of policies, that we show that the effects of policy can be summarized by a variable that we call the policy slack, and you can decompose these effects, the effects of the policy, into an average and a distributional channel. We show that this distributional channel is important, but it also has strong general equilibrium effects. And with the minutes I have left, let me say something. This is part of a broader HANC agenda at the Central Bank of Chile. We have many ideas running now. To name you some of them, we have papers in which we are analyzing heterogeneous and endogenous consumption bundles, the macro effects of unconditional, like these ones, versus conditional fiscal transfers. We have another one that we are studying the role of time-barrier income risk for Chile, where we take advantage of all of this data that is really nice to study these kind of questions, and much more. Thank you very much. I will be happy to answer all of your questions, and thanks for your attention.